Right, we are live. Nice.
Fantastic. I welcome everyone viewing to this beautiful live stream with two beautiful Bitcoin entrepreneurs. And it is my absolute pleasure to finally, after some difficult technical struggles, introduce you. But I know that failure is not an option for guys like you, although there's still some technical downside here, I think. But we really very much welcome Joshua Scigala from Vaultoro and Aleks Svetski from Amber. How are you guys doing tonight?
Awesome, man. Awesome. Can't be better.
Really fantastic. So yeah, look, quick introduction. I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable with too much oversold, but starting alphabetically with Aleks, maybe Amber app, the leading dollar cost averaging app in Australia, making it easy to regularly stack sats, right? And likewise, a fantastic service with Vaultoro from Joshua Scigala in Berlin. That's going to be very interesting. I think we will talk a little bit about these services also. Lets you trade gold in Bitcoin, right? So let's jump right in. The reason why I asked you on Twitter, let's have a chat, is because this Australian news came up, and I think there's a tendency that the world is definitely turning a little bit crazy these days. And so I'm very interested, you guys being on a mission, building Bitcoin infrastructure and Bitcoin services. How do you keep optimistic? How do you keep up? How do you still enjoy the beautiful side of life these days?
You want to take that, Aleks?
Yeah, sure. I was gonna say you go first, but may as well. I have deleted basically every social media account except for Twitter. So
nice.
I try and avoid any knowledge of what's going on in the world, because you can't make sense of it. I mean, like, even shit on Twitter pisses me off. I was flicking through while I was waiting for you guys, and then I saw this thing from reddit.com saying that we can no longer allow any content that shows people of color as the aggressor. So due to the new Reddit updates to its policies and rules, as well as administrator conversations with users, we can no longer allow any posts, comments, or other content that shows a person of color as the aggressor. This is considered hate speech and or harassment towards an important minority group that is no longer allowed. This absolutely means any videos, as well as news reports, photos, so it's like, what the fuck?
Oh, there goes the NWA subreddit.
Man, like, what? I don't know if we're living in the Twilight Zone, or if, I don't know, man. Like,
the SJWs have won, basically.
Look, this is one of those. It feels like we're in chapter, also not chapter 3, but like in the third section of Atlas Shrugged. I don't know if you boys have read it, but where basically sure. The looters, the moochers have basically taken over, and there's a few smart people left, but they're on their way to Galt's Gulch to leave, and basically these clowns bring the whole thing down on top of their own heads, and that's basically the direction it's headed in. And like, the more I see this madness devolve into further madness, it just gives me solace that Bitcoin exists, and knowing that we have a gulch of sorts where wealth can be protected, and yeah, when this whole shit show either grinds to a halt or blows itself up, there was a good saying the other day that I saw on Twitter, or it wasn't a good saying, sorry, someone said, hyper Bitcoinization happens, what next? And then someone just said, we rebuild. So it's like, that piece there is really, and I know every generation you have your doomers and gloomers and shit, like you had Mark Faber and Gerald Celente and all those maniacs, like from 10, 15, 20 years ago, but like, we're really seeing things, I think, come to a head. I think there is differences now around how messed up the world is. I think those guys were right just very, very early. So who knows? Or the alternative is we could all be fucking crazy, and the way forward is with the SJWs, but I highly doubt that.
Joshua, how do you keep sane?
Oh man, it really is one of the big keys, you said it, Aleks, is that you have to get rid of social media, because it really is like it's madness. It's total madness. And what's kind of interesting though is when you compare different countries. So I'm an Australian living in Germany. We've had thousands of cases here, and people have like, okay, in the beginning they were like, okay, this is pretty bad. Let's shut it down. We don't know what this is. We don't know what this is. This is something coming out of China. It's new. We don't know. Is it man-made? Is it not? Stuff. And I went to sort of personal lockdown. I didn't need the state to tell me what to do. I just did it through my own personal protection, and kept an eye on what was going on. And as the months have gone on, we have all learnt what this thing is and decided, right, well, me personally, I've decided, okay, it looks like it's more dangerous if you go to hospital with this, because they're probably going to kill you by shoving things down your throat and stuff. So you don't want this because you don't want to go to hospital, basically. No, and what has really happened through this whole period is a total destruction of freedoms, the total destruction of any sort of reason and evidence, the total destruction of natural health. That's been like, if you're into natural health, you might as well just be, I don't know, a flat earther, because you're just so weird. And all of Google has banned everything to do with anything to do with natural health. That was the last straw for me. I had to change to DuckDuckGo to actually find something about like natural cure for XYZ, because Google would just bring you up officialdom for pages. And I was like, oh, I can't find what I'm looking for anymore. So that's how I stay sane. Is I also got rid of, I got rid of Facebook a long time ago, but I changed my search engine. I look after my family and look after my business. Try not to engage with the strange Orwellian directed by David Lynch movie that we're all sort of sitting here.
Dude, and do you know what's funny? It's like two things I'll mention there. One, I did a tweet which everyone got angry about in March, which was, good for your health. Get out in the sun, go for a run, don't watch mainstream media.
Get some earthing.
Get some earthing. Buy Bitcoin, read books.
Nice.
Bad for your health. Watch mainstream media. Stay inside. Become a prisoner, watch Netflix, and scroll through fucking Instagram, right? So it's like, and people are like, oh, you're so stupid for going outside. It's like, fuck you morons. Like, this is exactly why, the more we deviate from, nature, the more the more we isolate ourselves, the more we sanitize everything, the more distant we are from nature. And then the fact of the matter is, at some point, a rebalancing will happen, but the rebalancing actually looks like a virus or a sickness. So it's from a macro level. That's one point I wanted to say. But the other point was what did you say at the end? You said something at the end that I wanted to touch on.
Just to change search engines.
Otherwise, maybe I can jump in and guide over, because
shoot.
I am, of course, like you said, it's absolutely insane to be live, right, with this development that it's been many people have been alarming, right? And we see these tendencies, and it's fascinating, worrying and fascinating. But at the end of the day, as long as you're not personally, I think, affected somehow, which is not really the case yet, you have to continue somehow, right? It's quite an interesting time. So in order to guide over to something a bit more uplifting and positive, such as Bitcoin, I thought, because you both guys are people that prefer, I think, to stick to the truth, and that's, I think, the main difference also when you watch this Corona crisis and other strange developments right now. There are people who are still interested to work scientifically, if you want to call it that way, or just interested in open debate and letting the better argument win. And then there are people that are just completely in apocalypse mode, lost all reason, and are just following whoever leader basically. And so I think that's something where Bitcoin leaders, if you will, or Bitcoiners, have quite a strong advantage. If you follow Twitter, I mean, it was also fascinating. Some people were also very much in the fear zone with the mathematical predictions. But then still, I think at the end of the day, so people like you, you don't shut your mouth, right? Like you will stick to the truth until the very last day. So I wonder, how do you see Bitcoin maybe also as a community, where people like us, gather, and exactly this, what you mentioned with Ayn Rand, maybe Bitcoin is kind of this digital Fort Galt where people with who want to follow reason and science basically, and looking for the right answer rather than some sort of ideology and emotionally with emotional decision making, crazy shit basically. So you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I've got a comment for that. So I actually just remember what I was going to say before when Josh said about Orwellian, and it actually reminded me of another tweet I made a little while back, which was, whilst the world feels partially Orwellian, it feels, a big part of it is like, Brave New World Huxley-esque, and it's almost like I wrote a tweet which is, someone fucked up the simulation and mixed up Orwell and Huxley together. So we've got like Brave New 1984. Like it's a mixture of both.
It really is. That's true.
It's so weird, man. It's so weird. But to your other question, man. So yes, I think what's interesting about the Bitcoin community is that, and it's such a microcosm of how a free society might one day function, which is individuals going out and making their own decision based on information, based on something that's really, really missing in today's society, which is critical thinking, right? So we the state basically puts us through public schooling, not fucking education, but public schooling. They put us through this sausage machine. So when we're young and impressionable, we get shoved through this sausage machine. We get taught rote learning and regurgitation as a fucking skill. And we come out, 12 to 18 years later, saying the same shit, thinking the same way. And we're lucky if a few of us are naturally intelligent enough or renegade or rebel enough to question things and to think critically. Now, I think, the result of that is a severe lack of critical thinking. And, one of the self-reinforcing effects that has is the less someone thinks critically, the more they depend on somebody else to think for them, which means they remove their own agency and personal responsibility. The more they do that, the more they then depend on somebody else to make the decision for them and be responsible. And you get this whole spiral of fucking degeneration where people become dumber as individuals because they outsource their ability to make decisions, and they outsource effectively their individual agency to some imaginary collective, which they've endowed with some moral, ethical, and economic fucking, high ground, which is a scam, because what you do in that kind of society is you optimize for this strong collective, which is this imaginary institution run by a couple fucking people, and a weak population, a weak populace with, comprised of weak individuals. And what I love about sort of the Bitcoin space is you got these renegades, these rebels, these critical thinkers who all do their own research and come to, conclusions. Now, it's not all of them, human beings are all fallible. So, there has been a lot of Bitcoiners that I was kind of disappointed with, but at least, some of them came to a different conclusion than I did based on at least some of their own reading. Although, by and large, it seems like the Bitcoin community and Bitcoiners in general have converged upon, some similarity of opinion around at least, if not whether corona or not was real or not, at least we've converged on the agreement that the approach that's been taken with this thing has been a fucking, a ridiculous mess, et cetera, et cetera. So to tie off this thought is that I think Bitcoin just represents, and particularly Bitcoin Twitter represents, individuals naturally converging to a consensus, or at least the, 1, 2, 3 opinions versus a state mandated or a collective institution mandated decision. And that's a really powerful example of the fact that human beings as strong individuals can come to functional conclusions faster, better, and more robustly than can a collective that forces it upon people and just knee jerks back and forth when they change their fucking mind because they can't read statistics or they can't do math. So anyway, that's sort of my thoughts there.
I think beautifully said. I guess that's the word that Joshua would say. Joshua, do you also think that, I think the world is like an ultimate fake, and it's becoming even more fake. And in a similar way that, Bitcoin with its math-based, strength, it's smashing the fake money. It's also helping to bring down these other deceptions and fake, artificially, or planned economy, top-down social orders.
Yeah, it definitely does. When Wuhan got shut down, the only people that really were seeing it very early that I could see, I don't know if it's my social circle, but I saw that Bitcoiners were very early to see that there was something going on there, while a lot of other people were like, laughing it off, and you're a Joe, don't worry about it. And I was like, you don't understand exponentiality. There's a 2-week incubation period, apparently. And if that's the case, we don't know what this is. This is going to be everywhere very quickly. And I think that's why it's that exponential number that people outside of the Bitcoin space find it really, really, I mean, even people in the Bitcoin space, but especially early adopters, they understand why Bitcoin is so interesting because of exponentiality. But they're also, I think, there's this problem generally in society that I'm starting to see a lot of, and I don't know how to sort of, because it's such a strange phenomenon. It's like, I guess scientism is kind of the thing where it's this obsession like a religion of science, but it's not real science. No one's using their critical thinking like Aleks. They just sort of say, no, the scientist said so. And that's the truth. And there's no, that's the holy truth, and we should bow down to them and never question them.
And it's always the government mandated scientist, not the scientist to come and has the contrary view to what the state said, but it's the government mandated scientist who's apparently right. Anyway,
exactly. No, spot on. And the whole point of science is to constantly have contrarian views, and to say, hey, and you should be glad that if you've studied one thing your whole life and you're really certain about it, and you're sitting there on your deathbed and some junior scientist comes in and goes, hey, guess what? I've just ruined your entire life's work by proving it wrong. You should be happy and die a happy man that someone has taken truth further in an empirical sense, rather. And this is sort of broken now, because especially with this obsession with fake news as this thing where we can just shut down any contrarian views, no matter how weird they are. There's strange things about the world that we don't even like. You would think everything about water, for instance, and they're just now starting to realize that why a small cloud up in the sky that weighs 1,000 elephants even stays up there. They don't even know. They think it's like the heat pushing it up, but actually it's charge differential. And for the first time, water is actually a charge, and there's like negative and negative. The ground is negative ionized, and the sky is usually positive. And anyway, there's all these things within our knowledge base as humanity that we really still don't have truth for. And that word is it's thrown around like crazy, but it's very, very hard to get to truth. And I feel that, I don't know where I'm going with this rant here, but that Bitcoin is a kind of malleable, a little bit, their brain is a little bit more plastic to sort of see, right, okay, let's adjust this or that. And they also have that grasp of exponentiality, which is a little bit more in their favor.
Also, in general, very generalist mindset, right? You have to be very open, and that's, I think, also very important. That you're very open. You don't have a determined mindset, right? You know that you don't know anything. That's the first step. Aleks, do you want to add to that, or otherwise, I have a beautiful transition towards.
Yeah, let's transition, man.
So you're both founders, CEOs of fantastic Bitcoin companies, and I think now we set kind of the small talk about the things that are going on, and also a little bit of philosophy. So that would make me interested. Like, how do you deal in your teams, the leadership aspect, right? As the front man, you have a lot of responsibility now, even more so, right? To steer through these odds. What is like the biggest challenge? And also, what I would love to know is, as an entrepreneur, you always have to, get up again, right? And withstand. And do you have also this feeling that it's actually getting easier now because it's more obvious that you're on a mission somehow?
What do you mean by what specifically?
So maybe like first question is like you have to inform your team about does it affect you, the corona? Do you have measures? Do you think it's gonna be, the economy is gonna worse and you gotta or you just like, no, actually you will be on the winning side of the whole thing? But do you have any new insights about yourself that this new situation around the world, which definitely affects your business? You cannot fly anymore, right? And also your employees maybe have to stay in quarantine. That affects their psychology. How do you guide and support your company and your team right now?
My situation hasn't changed too much because I was already mobile because I'd left for some conferences and things like that. So the situation was already very similar to what it is now. And half of our team, well, not half of our team, but one of our main devs was working remotely anyway, and the other one had to work remotely for a little bit because of some visa shit. So we're kind of a little bit, we had already, I guess, climatized, I guess, or acclimated to that environment. So for me, it hasn't really changed much. If anything, probably in the psyche of the team, they've seen how what we're doing with Bitcoin, why it's important. And I know it's probably, this is not majorly relevant to me from a business perspective, to be honest. And yeah, that I mean, I don't know if it's different for you, Josh.
Has anything changed for you, Josh?
The thing is, running a Bitcoin business is very different than running any other business because you're constantly smashed with fires. Whether, by the way, you wake up in the morning, your bank account has been like, you need to get a new bank account for your entire business. And you ask the business, or whatever, like these sorts of things. Or, hey, guess what? Your government has just banned your entire business model overnight because Facebook decided to, burp out Libra. And so it was like, there's constant things. So the COVID is just another little thing compared to the constant changes that you have to be. So you really have to be very adaptable, always moving, always changing, always rearranging. In terms of general business, the hardest thing of being an entrepreneur is, for me, that I've learned through my time, is to fire people quicker. And it's just not my nature. I'm a nice guy and it's horrible. It's horrible. But sometimes you sort of, you hide things that people are doing wrong and you let them slide. And you think, I couldn't get someone to take over that because, they're an important part of the business. They do so much and I couldn't possibly replace them. But really, if I had to start again, I would be a lot like I would hire twice as many people and fire half of them all the time.
It comes back to the truth aspect, no? To be very truthful to yourself and the truth in the end, right? To have good decisions. I would like to know your personal opinion on the markets right now. So through this, all these stimulus, cash injections, right? Do you see a clear? Do you expect an even more impressive effect of money printer go brr and then number go up? What's your view currently on that?
I guess
so. When you go,
yeah, like the thing is, a lot of people, as they saw the crisis hit and money printers started going brr, we saw, first of all, we saw a massive manipulation of the stock market in February, March. They just kept on going up, even though all planes were grounded. Their stocks of those airlines were still going up, even though car companies were freezing totally production lines in Asia. Their stocks were going up, and it was just weird, right? And then we had this massive crash, and everything crashed. Gold crashed, Bitcoin crashed, everything crashed, and all these people were like, "Hey, Bitcoin and gold, you guys have been telling us for years that this is a hedge against the big crash. And look at us now, you fools." But it's not what we've been saying. Everything crashes at once because people need liquidity in the moment. They need to sell everything they've got to cover other positions that are bleeding worse than that one. And so in crisis moments, everything goes down. Now, after the crisis, once the money printers have been on for a while, you start to see total distortions. I mean, we're seeing countries in South America just getting obliterated. Argentina, we're seeing, it's country after country where we're starting to see the effects of the nonsense economic theory that's been playing out, this ridiculous experiments that have been going on globally playing out. And this is where Bitcoin and gold shine after the massive crash. So huddle onto your seats, folks.
Yes, indeed. I think the funniest part for me, and it was really interesting because I've been a Main Street bear for too long, and that sort of bled into my being a Wall Street bear in the sense that I've always just felt the disconnect between reality and what's going on in terms of stock market prices, because it's no longer a representation of value. I saw like a promoted tweet from eToro the other day saying, 2010 Netflix was this much, 2020 it's this much, blah blah. And I just sort of retweeted it and said, yeah, that's 20% value creation, 80% money print to go burr, because that's effectively what so like I had this argument with some crazy bitch on Tinder the other day who was quoted herself as a fucking economist, right? And try to sit there and tell me that things like the free market economics has been disproven, that it it's not functional, or that that what was the other thing she said, that money's just made up, so it doesn't matter. It's like, you fucking idiot. Like, if you can't define base something as basic as money as the mechanism via which individuals store, trade, and measure their time and effort. So in other words, money will always exist. Maybe the medium that we use for money might change, but money as a fucking concept will always exist. It's not a fucking figment of our imagination, you dumbass. So anyway, that kind of stuff triggers me. But
tell us how you really feel about that.
I know, right? I know. She tried to sit there and argue that the problem with the world is big corporates who have
of course it is,
who have amassed their all this wealth and are subjugating everybody to their whims. And it's like, well, let's hold on for a second. I was like, why do these big corporates have an opportunity to amass so much wealth? It's because they're greedy, they're assholes, they all work in their self-interest, and we don't have enough regulation to stop monopolies, because the free market itself creates monopolies. I was like, no, that is logically inconsistent. When when you create a monopoly in the form of a government or a state, and you give it the monopoly over the creation of money, what you then get is the incentive to get friendly with whoever is at the the center of the monetary spigot and the regulatory spigot. So you want to be as close as possible to these monopolies, and the closer you get to these monopolies, the more you're able to amass wealth and build a moat, not via innovation and value adding, but via leeching and via access to cheap capital. Now, that cheap capital can come in the form of the issuance of bonds directly, which a lot of the large corporates do. But more importantly, is it gets filtered through, because all of this cheap excess fucking capital goes to these banks, and these banks need to put the stuff somewhere, so it goes into property and stocks, which then drives the valuations of these companies up, making them more wealthy, giving them the ability to then concentrate economic power, not through more innovation, but again, being closer to the monetary spigot and being where the overall capital flows. So she was sitting there trying to make an argument to me that the link between central banks and and concentration of power is not so clear or not so evident. I was like, what are you saying? Like,
Yeah.
The link is about as clear as day, but for some reason your incomprehensible mind can't make sense of that. So all of the stuff that we're seeing today is a function of these distortions. Like I've started a new YouTube channel, and I'm about to upload all the videos that I've done in the last week. I've got 10 videos coming up, and one of them is going to be called "You Cannot Have Capitalism When Public Property and Central Planning Exists." Like, you can't. You can have maybe a degree of capitalism, and just as a testament to the power of free markets, capitalism, and innovation and entrepreneurialism, despite all of the central planning, despite all of the monetary printing, despite all of that crap, innovation still manages to find its way through and still manages to topple monopolies. But unfortunately, we are reaching a period of time in the world where the wealth and all of that sort of crap has concentrated to such a great extent, and fundamentally good innovators, like the Amazons and Apples of the world, who still do a lot of innovation. When you can couple that together with being close to the monetary spigot, holy shit, you basically get unstoppable monopolies. And like I said,
or duopolies. Usually duopolies. These governments sort of hide behind the fact, look, we haven't got a monopoly because we've got like a duopoly.
Yeah.
And but the manipulation goes a lot further when it comes to monopolies, because, like you said it perfectly, by the way, but I would add that you have things like the stock market, which was never really designed for the vast amount of money that people are forced to save through their 401ks and through their superannuation. Are forced now to put all this money into it. Now, that money is now not actually used to invest. It's used to speculate. And the difference is they just look at charts. They just do look at charts. So they go, oh, this one's up. So they don't really care about something good. So all this money is slushing around the stock market, and of course, if there's anything that collapses, then everything collapses. All of a sudden, all these you have a massive wipeout of people's entire life savings. But you've also got massive manipulations, and on top of that, you've got these really distorted incentives for CEOs who have been studying a long time to become a CEO, are not going to make sort of dangerous or long-term decisions that might destroy the stock market price for a little bit because they're investing in the long-term growth of the company. They'd rather do always pumpy decisions.
Pump while they're there. That's it.
Pump while they're there. So that's one type of monopoly where you have an enforcement rule across an entire globe really, but country-wise, about where vast amounts of wealth, the most wealth that people have got, are these forced savings, and what to do with them. So there's those sorts of distortions as well. But you're right, like monopolies in a true free market cannot happen. And I tell you why, ladies and gentlemen, it's because, and any good entrepreneur knows this. If I go to my board and I say, right, there's this competitor over there, and we should eat them up because we can afford it, we've got a lot of capital, and it'll do good for it. Okay, good. Right. And by the way, next week we say those ones as well. And we start eating up all our competitors. After we've eaten like 99%, there's one competitor left. That last one is going to be so expensive that I walk into the board and they're like, are you crazy, Josh? You can't buy them. That'll bankrupt us. And you say, no, because by the time we buy that last one, think about how we can hike our prices up and just ride the market. Great. Well, by the time you buy that one, you pretty much bankrupt yourself. And not only that, you become so slow and big, you can't pivot anymore. Meanwhile, all these other startups are like, going, hey, did you hear that Josh is buying up everything? Let's just start a competitor and get bought, because they're buying them for crazy amounts. Okay, let's all these competitors start coming out, like, oh, I've got to buy them all. I've got to buy. Like, it doesn't happen. How monopolies happen is a state goes, you need a rule for that. You need a rule for that. You can't do that. You can't with 200,000. You need a license for that. You need no. By the way, you want to have a vaccine? Well, that's the only vaccine that's allowed to come out for that, and that's the only vaccine. And plus, everyone has to have that one. And by the way, these are how monopolies happen. Free markets. It is impossible. Well, it's improbable, I would say, as any good scientist.
It's actually, I would venture to say that it is impossible, because, like, if we, assuming we're defining a proper free market, is that in a free market where nobody can moat due to some mandate or some decree, you will always have a opportunity to do something different or do something better. Innovation will always trump size. That's the law, not of human beings. That's the law of life. Simple as that. When something gets too big, when it gets too cumbersome, you like, large companies suffer from very different problems than small ones do. And like the assumption that somehow bigger is better just goes to show, like, I had an epiphany today. I was like, how could someone be so dumb and have this argument that everything converges into corporate monopolies for some reason, like, because entrepreneurs are somehow bad or businesses are bad? It's like, the only kind of person that can say that is someone who's never done anything entrepreneurial in their life. It's a fucking moron academic who's read some
Usually
books
students,
and thinks that exactly. That's exactly what it is. So someone who's arrogant enough to have never built anything in their own lives. As an entrepreneur, what do I revel in? I revel in finding industries where you've got large, institutionalized players that are doing things the old way. Like that's fucking opportunity, for fuck's sake. Like, so the very definition of a free market and the ability to go and create new ways of adding value with the intent of adding more value through different types of innovation and better productivity, etc., by definition means you can't have monopolies. There is, what these monkeys fail to understand is that life and any complex system is dynamic. You don't have. It's exactly the same way as Apple beat fucking IBM from a goddamn garage. Like, that doesn't happen because of corporate greed. It happens because innovation trumps no matter how fucking big you are. And that is the consistent recurring theme. And it's something that stands true for free markets. The more free it is, the less you get monopolies. As soon as you create one monopoly in the form of a government or a regulator or a central bank or a central planner, then you actually skew the board and you create incentives for monopolies or duopolies or something, some form of oligopoly to form around that monopoly. When you remove that, you can't. It makes that ability for concentration, impossible, and it makes the market, the landscape, and everything freer and more dynamic.
It's beautiful to listen, wonderful to listen. Bitcoiners in full Austrian economics and philosophy. Of course, I think it's just, the government is ridiculing itself every year more, right, with all these interventions. I wanna stay on the beautiful, exciting side of Bitcoin, but I want to ask you: you have of the Sequoia Capital PDF of 2008, right? Where they claimed rest in peace, good times, and made a very dystopian also market analysis to advise their shareholders and startups. Are you aware of that? Are you familiar?
Yeah, I remember it. I read it a long time ago, but I do know which one you're talking about.
Okay, so I mean, I'm not too familiar with it itself, but I think in general it just basically predicted what's happening now to an extent, that there might be margin pressure and you better watch out. And yeah, it was titled "Rest in Peace, Good Times," and I mean that title for sure I think is pretty accurate. So I want to ask, do you know about it, Josh?
No, but I have got very similar articles given to me by many VCs through the whole COVID thing. Raise, fire as many people as you can with their advice, because you're going to have to ride this out for like years, and no one's going to be raising money. Capital's going to dry up everywhere, and I'm like, I'm a Bitcoin and a gold company. I think we'll be all right.
So that was my question now. What would be the counter thesis? So the big Silicon Valley elites, I think also this narrative and media, like the new normal, and like there's a transition, right? I think you kind of sense this, that like there's more behind that, right? And now I think as Bitcoiners, we also have our fair share of impact on the history of the world. So what would be your pitch deck to advise another company how to go forward from now? How to allocate, how to position yourself?
Josh, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to take it?
Yeah, I mean, it depends what sort of company they are. It's a very difficult question, but in terms of generally setting up, I don't think we're in any different times. Usually, economic crises, they happen very quickly, and they just destroy a hell of a lot of value, and then they'll come out the other side with a new fiat at the other end. So if you can hedge your way through anything that is a catastrophic fiat collapse by either having property or some sort of rare asset, like a rare number or a rare metal, then you're okay, or land or something that's like that's kind of, land is not that liquid, so it's a bit hard, but I think generally you have to find what people like, and you can look back through historical precedents as well, through bad times. If you see that, if you really believe, and every business is a belief on looking forward. You have to be visionary. You have to look, what am I seeing? And okay, I'm seeing that the world is going to go downhill. Okay, let's have a look in the past. What industries have thrived through downward things? Usually gambling always does well, entertainment does well, alcohol does well in down, because people always want to get drunk. They always want to try and speculate, and also they want to be entertained. They want to forget their woes. So this is historically. So maybe that's a business to go into. But yeah, it's a tricky question because it's so broad. But yeah, I think that's my answer.
Yeah, go ahead, Aleks, if you want to add.
Well, what was the question? Like, what should people do, or?
Well, yeah. So I think if you maybe have a friend who is running a business, maybe also in finance, and he's not as prolific in Bitcoin and Austrian economics, to give him maybe hope or some inspiration. What are your personal what is your setup to go through this and be sort of anti-fragile and to be perhaps even a winner of this situation?
Okay, I mean, the entrepreneurial rules never really change. Like, I've always been I've never really had a job, so I've been in business ever since I was 20 years old, and have made money, lost money, Jesus Christ, I've fucked up more times than I think people do in 2 lifetimes inside 10 years. So like I've had quite a bit of experience just through taking lots of chances and really just pushing the envelope of my own capability at different points in time. So the one thing that sort of kept me going though is perseverance and persistence, or grit, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's probably the most important of all entrepreneurial skills, is actually sticking around, because more often than not, it's the person who sticks around the longest that outlasts the competitors who may be better, but just maybe more flaky, or maybe in it for a quick buck and realize that the buck ain't so quick, so they piss off. So realistically, tough times and downturns, in many ways are good, because that they allow for a bit of a cleansing. All bear markets allow for cleansing, and a lot of that I might touch here is that all natural markets, in fact, all markets have uptimes and downtimes. The difference in a Keynesian model is that the uptimes last a lot longer and they're much more dramatic, and then the downtimes are really fucking quick, sharp, and catastrophic. Like they break the damn system before the money printers kick off again, and that can only last so long until everything really blows up. Whereas in a free market system, you will get these imbalances where people sort of converge around a new technology or whatever, and you'll get some bloating and some natural rebalancing, etc. But it's a much more it's a lighter and more shallow modulation with what I believe would be a much cleaner and more logical sort of growth pattern. So it's not so downturns really, the function of a downturn in an economy is just the cleansing of the less capable, or the more flaky, or the less committed players in the game. And that is just a standard entrepreneurial rule which will never go away. So for any person who's running a business, whether you're in Bitcoin or not, like right now is the time to figure out how to stick around, because if you do, then you're going to be competing with less people later, and as a result, you're going to likely, should demand in whatever you're working and pick up again, you will, be able to capture more of the supply. In other words, have a bigger business. It's not rocket science. It's just a matter of having the guts and the grit to stick around. So that's, I think, a really important, thing to know as a business owner, but also just as a strong value and ethic as a human being. We're all taught to fucking complain these days.
I've really struggled with that too in some of my businesses, because what you say is absolutely true. Is that if you can just keep firing back the ping pong ball instead of trying to like smash it, if you just keep trying to like easily you wait for the other person to make a mistake, and the competition just goes. So it's about staying long, right? But at the same time, there's and males are generally more susceptible to this, is just sticking to your guns way too long.
Yeah.
If you're failing, but you've invested so much that you're like you're gonna just have to throw more money in, and this time it'll work. Just this year is the one, and really you should have just let it go years ago and done a whole fresh different project, because you sort of drank your own Kool-Aid. And this balance of understanding of when to stick by, because sometimes, and you're right, it's the people that really can stick by and finally it breaks through are the ones that can have huge wins as well. But then sometimes you can waste a lot of time as well chasing dream, and that's the fine balance, right?
It is. Well, that's where I think wisdom and experience comes in, is like there's a fine line between being stubborn and being determined. And I think what you're describing there is, particularly, the masculine energy is one that can very easily conflate stubbornness with determination, right? And that, particularly when you're young, you're probably more on the stubborn side. Like if I look back at myself when I was young, fuck me. Like, I completely conflated determination and stubbornness. I was a little shit who wouldn't take no for an answer. And in many ways, it built, like, layers of strength in my character. But man, did I make some stupid decisions along the way. Whereas, the ability to elegantly, or to be able to sense the nuance between that stubbornness and that determination, being able to know when you're being determined versus being stubborn, I think that's just something that you need to learn through experience and actually burn yourself through being stubborn. But again, it's just a natural balancing mechanism of a human individual, and it's another natural system. Like, when allowed to make these mistakes and self-regulate and self-correct, finds its own equilibrium, and that's the best way, as opposed to being forced to make a particular decision or be a particular way. So there's these fractals apply all over natural systems.
Thank you for sharing your views. It's wonderful, and we're coming to an end sooner or later, but I have a few last questions for you that you will maybe like. And the first one is looking at Bitcoin after the halving. What is your feeling about, will we see a breakout soon? I heard people saying to me that they sense there's a little bit of dynamic now, that there's maybe an alt season coming. Have you had a similar experience, that people were talking more about alt season again, and like some altcoins picking up? And what is your general view on the next couple months? Do you see something is cracking, or yeah?
Josh, you go first.
Yeah, I mean, alt seasons will come. I think that I don't think alt season will come until there's been a long-winded Bitcoin season. Of course, today we had an alt season, but I don't think it's a season. It's more like a day of people crazily speculating on just, there's no way possibly that the market could just go up by billions of dollars collectively in one. It's just all sort of pump and dump. There's like very illiquid markets, and it's not really a season. It's just a day of nonsense. But saying that, it will definitely come once Bitcoin has gone for a nice big ride for a couple of weeks, where it's just every day just cruising. Then it'll pause at a plateau somewhere, and then the Bitcoin, the altcoins will go and catch up. And that's when the season comes in. Generally, I mean, that's just historically. I don't know if it's going to happen again, but historically, that's what's happened. It sort of follows. But on the way down, it doesn't happen the same way. It goes even faster. They follow Bitcoin on the way down.
Yeah, I mean, on my side, like, as much as I want every alt or every shitcoin to burn and die and bleed and fucking bankrupt all the morons holding them, I'm realistic enough to realize that that like you just said, Josh, it's most likely going to follow one more time, maybe, who knows, maybe even two more cycles of Bitcoin's run ups. But the thing is, every time we have a cycle, we have more strength and more hodlers and more people that realize Bitcoin's importance. Because I'm a fundamental believer that cryptocurrencies and altcoins and everything are much more similar to the legacy financial system than they are to Bitcoin. In fact, they stand in direct opposition to what Bitcoin represents. Bitcoin represents this idea of sound money, of low time preference, of a fixed monetary unit, of digital scarcity, of unconfiscatability, of uncensorability. That's what Bitcoin fucking stands for. All these other things stand for the idea of the creation of fucking fiat out of thin air by monkeys running around issuing their own fucking coins. So, like, for me, I would prefer the legacy financial system over crypto any day of the week. At least the legacy financial system has some checks and balances in place, where crypto is just run by a bunch of deranged nerds who are no different to Mark Zuckerberg, except instead of getting to fuck with people's ability to communicate. They get to fuck with people's, money and wealth. So I think crypto is a much bigger disaster than the financial system, and then the basically anything else that I've seen in the world. So for me, I'm, as annoying as it is for me to see, I think there will likely be an alt season after a Bitcoin run. But like you said, the shit that we're seeing today, I didn't even know anything happened today, to be honest. But I mean, these small bumps, intraday and all that sort of stuff, all these bag holders are sitting there wishing and hoping and praying that their fucking shit coins go up in price. So they're all like, as soon as there's a little bump in price, everyone's running around screaming for alt season, because Jesus, their savior, has come to fucking, salvage and, help them repent for their sins. But it's, it ain't gonna fucking come until there's some real capital that flows in from Bitcoin, for Bitcoin, sorry. And then that'll drive the market up. And then there'll probably, be a bleed into shitcoins. And because shitcoins are light, illiquid, thin markets, it will not take much capital at all to drive these things through massive, pumps. And because those pumps are unsustainable, then they'll go through massive fucking dumps, as we've seen before. And then that'll create another cycle of people who realize the hard way that Bitcoin is, the sound money revolution versus those a fucking Ponzi scheme. And, more Bitcoin hodlers will create a higher base, and we'll go through another bear market and blah, 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 blah. And so we will continue again.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, just Leon, I'd like your take on it as well, actually. But I would add, Bitcoin, even if Bitcoin gets, isn't the bee's knees, somehow Bitcoin isn't, let's say it's not. The thing that Bitcoin has that every one of them doesn't have is the fact that it was the first, and there's 21 million, and humans have this need for collecting. It's like, I've got one of the first cryptocurrencies ever in Bitcoin. So nothing else can have that. So there'll always be collector's item, where there will not be collector's item on anything else, really. Maybe ETH, or maybe I don't know. But these ETH is just like there's so many of them. Like it's just there's no way it can really. You have 21 million. It's such an easy thing to get your head around with Bitcoin. It's truly scarce, and and a lot of these, to back up what you were saying, a lot of these DeFi projects have a nice name, decentralized finance, but they're not really DeFi. They're not really decentralized at all. A lot of them are just absolutely centralized, and they call themselves DeFi. So there's not really anything.
There is nothing decentralized other than Bitcoin, like fundamentally. Anyway.
Yeah, I want to touch again on your views. What is the most significant bullish news for you in the recent days? I think everyone is still we're after the halving. It's a non-event as expected, and now the big question is, right, what's going to happen next? Will it really just will it be the stock to flow model? Will it hold? There is no model that really can predict the future, right? But probably it's more accurate if you just see in your business, perhaps, right? Do you see trend is I think it's quite interesting when Bitcoin companies share a bit of the purchases done. I think one thing that's quite interesting is Grayscale Capital, right? They are buying a ton of Bitcoin. So what are for you kind of the signs right now that are either positive or negative?
The signs for me sorry, you want to take it?
You go first, bro. You go first, yeah.
The science for me is that really it's nothing to do with Bitcoin. It's all to do with the rest of the world. Basically, just printing. I mean, it took 200 years to print the first $1 trillion worth of debt, and they did 3 trillion in the first quarter of 2020. I mean, it's insane. It's insane. We're living in total insanity, and if people don't understand the idea of rare numbers, that I absolutely can I can resonate with the fact that they don't understand rare numbers, because you're like, how can you have rare numbers? But believe you me, folks, there are rare numbers now, and you can have one of 21 million, or some Satoshis of 21 million of them. And projects like yours, Aleks, are great because they allow people to stack those bits, and it's so important. It's so important to get the heck out of this nonsense that you guys, that the world, not you guys, I'm sorry, but that a lot of the world, I'm generalizing because it's the vast majority of the world, are stuck with a lot of money and value. When I say money, I mean people working their entire life. Their hopes and their dreams are put into this little bits of paper that are sitting, not even paper, they're just digits on a computer, and it's all going to be wiped out. It's all going to be wiped out. And if you don't understand that, study fiats that have been wiped out. Just study it. Have a look at economies that have collapsed and how many there are. There are literally thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of economies that collapsed. Every one of them has collapsed up to the ones that we got now.
From my side, I haven't seen a huge, there's no real, outlying bullish signals for me. Like, Amber being a retail product, we're actually a lagging indicator for anything bullish happening with Bitcoin. Like, realistically, noobs aren't going to, like I said this 6 months ago, which is, my guess in how Bitcoin's going to, trend during this next bull market is that it'll stay under the radar as it or by and large under the radar as higher net worths and maybe some smarter institutions and maybe some funds and shit like that accumulate the fucking thing until it hits like 20. There'll be a bunch of disbelief. It might pull back a little bit, and then once it breaks through that prior all-time high, that's when it's going to start getting some news again. And what you'll have is the retail market, who are the laggards, the people who might go to a product like Amber. They'll look at it, and initially it'll be disbelief. They'll be like, "Oh fuck, this can't be happening again. I thought Bitcoin was dead." So they'll see it go from 20 to 25 to 30. There'll be disbelief. 35, they'll be like, "Fuck me, now's the time to get in," and then they'll drive that thing to maybe 50, and then we might have a bit of a pullback, and then a bunch of them will shit their pants, and then you'll see probably another flood of people come in and be like, "Holy shit, this thing's at 30 grand. Last time I saw it, it was at 5. I thought it was dead." And you have these like waves all the way to 100. And I think retail will only probably get in this time from like 35, 40, 50 and up. And they'll probably drive the fucking thing to like 100, 150, 200 grand in the next year or two. But I can't see any sign of that as yet because Amber is, again, it's a retail product, and we're not going to see an uptick until that mania really starts to hit, and we're just not there yet. So have I seen any other bullish signs? Not really. Do I really give a shit? No. In fact, I hope that we stay in a sideways market for the rest of this year, because I'm personally trying to buy as much as I fucking can, and yeah, like I couldn't care less. I'm in this for the next, for the rest of my life, basically. So the longer I can buy cheap sats for, the happier I am. So I'm all for a low Bitcoin price.
Yeah, it's weird though, isn't it? Sorry, just to add to that, Leon. Did you want to say something, Leon? Sorry. It's weird. People have a strange mentality when it comes to Bitcoin, because if Bitcoin's really cheap, like if you go to the shop and there's jeans that are really cheap, you're like, I'm going to buy that. If there's Bitcoin and it's really cheap, you're like, oh no, if it's really expensive, these jeans, it's like they don't want to buy them. You're going to wait for them to go on sale. But with Bitcoin, if they're really expensive, you're like, I got to get in now. Like, just the weirdest. Come on. Everyone needs to see this as what it is, and see, look, this is just another thing, like a couch or a jeans or whatever. It's just a thing. Same with gold. It's a good. Bitcoin also acts as a currency, and that's what I really hope will happen. Is because I don't sit here going, "Oh, American dollars, they're gonna go up in value like crazy," because I don't know, some big startups starting to accept them, like. I, you know, I just, people just use these currencies, and I really hope that Lightning Network being, so wonderful. And if you guys haven't used the Lightning Network yet, download yourself a wallet. There's plenty of them now that are really nice interfaces, beautifully done, and can they're just magic when you take one of these things and you see, oh wow, I can send pre-confirmed sats around like that. They can trigger stuff. They're programmable. It's just wonderful. It's a wonderful user experience once. And these user experiences were horrible in the beginning, and because there was a new technology, and everyone that was into these alts were like, "See, it's crap, it's dead." But they're now starting to come into their own. A lot of these projects. So what's wonderful about that is try it before you slag it, and see for yourself. It's really something. So that will show you the value of what is coming, and like Aleks said, stack those sats.
Yeah, awesome. It's getting late, and I think you've done a beautiful job, and I hope our viewers have taken as much value of this conversation as I have. So the very last thing to do for now would be to fade out with the final question, which is, are you prepared for the scenario when the retail market will take off? Because that's, the Bitcoin entrepreneur has a bear market to survive, and then suddenly, eventually, right, like a big run or big rally, and then you have to be prepared. So are you guys prepared? And yeah, how can people use find your service maybe? And if you like, also, if you still have mental strength for it to perform it, a little bit of an explanation of the service, that would be great. So maybe again start with Josh and then Aleks.
Cool.
Yeah, so if people don't know, with Vaultoro, we've been around since 2015. Started coding it in 2014 after Mt. Gox collapsed. We thought, all right, this has got to stop, and we wanted a way for people to deal in gold bullion rather than fiat. So like, why are we using fiat? Why these exchanges go bust? You're stuck. And so we allow people to trade in allocated bullion, which is fully insured, fully audited. It's just a rock of metal sitting in a high security vaulting facility in Switzerland, and it's fully audited. That's not what you can't do that with a bank. It doesn't matter what sort of exchange, these fiat exchanges, if you even audit their banks, what the auditor comes in, looks at their bank account and goes, yeah. The fact of the matter is they don't know what the bank's doing. How liquid's the bank? Are the bank, totally illiquid? They're just speculating in some strange instrument. They don't know. So this is the whole point of getting out of that system, and being able to trade into gold and back into crypto at any time is what we do. We've been around for a long time. We've traded tons of gold, and literally, and that's that's what we do. If you want to check it out, it's Vaultoro. That's Vault as in gold vault, VAULT, and Oro, which is Spanish for gold. And you can catch me on Twitter at Scigala. That's JSCIGALA. That's I tweet about all things Austrian economics, anarchism, and free market, everything fun.
Great. Okay.
Plus, we've got an affiliate program coming up. Sorry, we've got an affiliate program coming up. Jump on that as well. We're launching that in next week, so that'll be really fun. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. All good.
So on my side, well, I think, to your question, is that the prepping never ends. I think, every time you think you're prepared, you realize, oh shit, I missed this, and I want to do that, and I want to add this, and complexity always increases, particularly when you're trying to innovate and build something cool. So, and I think also, kind of like you mentioned earlier, Josh, the the idea of running a Bitcoin company is annoying because bank account shuts you down, regulation changes, this, that. So you're always dealing with shit that normal businesses don't generally have to deal with. So just when you think you fucking sorted out, everything catches fire, and you're like, man, I just wanted to have a day off. So, we're doing our best to prepare as best as we can. Amber is available in Australia now. It's fully functional there. It's the best place to accumulate Bitcoin and Bitcoin only in Australia. Next step, we'll be doing some testing in Europe in the next 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks, depending on how quickly this new bank that I'm partnering with gets back to me. And if we've got that functional, then anyone with a SEPA enabled account or a BACS or faster payments enabled account in the UK will be able to use Amber. We'll probably test it with maybe 500 to 1,000 people to begin with. So if anyone's interested, DM me if you want to be part of that group. But yeah, it'll basically allow you to start accumulating Bitcoin in Europe, and then you'll be able to just straight up withdraw it to your own private wallet, etc. So that's basically the big part of the preparation we're doing. And then we're also releasing a more advanced version of Amber, which we're going to be calling Amber Black. And it's going to be kind of like a premium membership version that allows you to stack unlimited sats with no exchange fee. So it's a variation on our base product. Lots more information coming out on that in the coming months, but it's something I'm really excited about because the whole point is I want to take volume away from the shitcoin casinos, and I want to give them a Bitcoin only product to really drive some volume through. And I think we can do that with a premium version of Amber because we've spent so much time building the base infrastructure to enable newbies to invest in Bitcoin. So, or to protect their wealth or to build their wealth in Bitcoin might be a better way to place it, because I don't think this is about investing in Bitcoin. This is about, building wealth denominated in Bitcoin. So, so that's my answer. And I hope
Awesome.
to help people in Europe.
Thank you so much. It has been a fantastic chat with two truly wonderful Bitcoin entrepreneurs, and I mean, you can finally greet your mothers now if you wish so. And otherwise, I say thank you very much for your time, and have a great rest now for another productive day as a Bitcoin entrepreneur tomorrow.
Thanks, bro.
Thanks
Josh, pleasure to meet you, man.
Yeah, you too.
Stay in touch. Yeah.
If you're over this side of the pond, drop in.
I will. Yeah. Drop me a line on Twitter, man. I flicked your message already, so drop me a line, cool. And then let's hook up either on Telegram or Signal or something. We'll catch up.
Love
Thanks,
it.
guys. Good night.
Cheers.
See you guys. Ciao.